In today's video, I will be defining the long range meta for Season 2. A lot of people like to rush the videos out and get the views early on when they make meta videos and things like that. I like to take my time and really investigate stuff, really get all the numbers, make sure that I'm giving the correct recommendations. So I've spent a bunch of time on this, going through, making sure everything makes the most sense. As always, if you guys like the content, don't forget to drop a like on the video, a comment as well. And if you want to see more of my content, don't forget to subscribe. But let's jump into it and we will talk about Season 2 long range meta. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about, this is a new feature that's going to come to TGD relatively soon. It's already working because I used it for this video, but it's just not live public yet for you guys to use because we haven't built out the front end, things like that. But basically how this works is it's a new TTK value that's going to be a weighted TTK value, a continuously weighted TTK value over a curve for different situations. So for this video, obviously it was built for long range weapons. So how this works is basically at any range, it will weight the TTK based on a percentage for how important that TTK is at that range. So on this, you can see that the weighting is this blue line and then range is on the x-axis. So this is for long range weapons from 0 out to 80 meters. Obviously at longer ranges, time to kill is more important because that's where you're using these weapons. But up close, it's not like it's never used. It's not like you never have the wrong gun out inside 20 meters. So there's still some weighting. You can see it's 25% up to 50% out to about 18 meters, and then it keeps ramping up to 100% at 30 meters. So this is a new thing that's going to be out for TGD relatively soon. It can scale all the TTKs to a single number based on weighted averages of whatever curve I've defined for the specific type of playstyle, whether it's close range, long range, sniper sport, things like that. So that'll be out sometime soon. But yeah, pretty excited for that and a bunch of other things that are coming with that as well. But considering that, let's go look at how these numbers actually came out. So I plugged every viable weapon, single shot, assault rifles, LMGs, everything into this weighted TTK equation and got the number for all of those. So that's what we've got here in this column, the weighted TTK column. FTAC Recon is number 1 at 578 if you include open bolt delay in the RAAL. So if you don't know what open bolt delay is, that's just a delay from when the trigger is pulled to when the bullet's actually fired. In most situations, I think it should be included in time to kill because any situation where it's actually important that you could actually like die from the engagement is usually when you're both looking at each other, you both see each other at the same time, you both pull the trigger. So in that case, the time to kill of your weapon should include open bolt delay because that's going to be included in the amount of time compared to the other person. So I do think in most situations where it's important, open bolt delay should be considered, but if the person doesn't see you and you pull the trigger, then they don't even feel that open bolt delay in the time to kill. So that's important as well. I think it's important to consider both things. But yeah, with open bolt delay, the RAAL goes up to 519 milliseconds, which is still the second fastest in the game behind the FTAC Recon. Then we've got the Lockman 762 Auto. This is a battle rifle, has pretty awful recoil. I've got an accuracy column over here as well for approximately how accurate these weapons were in my hands when I was trying to shoot a long range target. So you can see I put FTAC Recon at really bad. 6 is the worst score I gave for accuracy, and that's because it's single fire. I personally don't think the FTAC Recon is a viable weapon for long range because it's just hard for me to hit shots when I'm trying to click really fast and actually get that single fire value to be pretty high. So FTAC Recon is capped at like 480 RPM, which there's no chance I'm clicking anywhere near that and being accurate at all. So I just don't think that's really a viable option. Lockman 762 Auto has too much recoil in my opinion for long range. SO14 Auto, if you stack every attachment for recoil, it actually gets pretty close to being usable. It's usable out to like maybe 60 meters or so. So this one's interesting, but for most situations, I just don't think it's going to be the right choice. And then regular SO14, not auto. Again, I can't click fast and be accurate, but both the SO14 and the LMS, if you're someone who's really good at clicking fast, being accurate, might be worth giving a shot. But for the vast majority of people, just an automatic weapon is going to be the play. Now we get into the RAAL-H, which is actually pretty accurate, has pretty good recoil, but the problem with it is it has this good TTK and it has pretty accurate recoil, but it has really fast RPM and an LMG speed reload. So the reload is just terrible on it, and that makes it painful because it has only a 75 round mag. So those three things combined just kind of make it hard to use. It's still a good gun, very good gun. But it's hard to use in a trios or quads setting where you have to get off a 7-second reload after you shoot 75 bullets on this gun that has high RPM. So you're going to run out of those bullets really quickly. Next up, we have the SAKIN MG38. This one is pretty decent. If you add in open bolt delay, it's still slightly faster time to kill than the RPK. But I do think the recoil is slightly worse than the RPK, and it has worse reload time. The RPK has that nice drum mag that can just be reloaded. It's still a longer reload, but it's like 5 seconds instead of the SAKIN, which is more like an 8-second reload, which is pretty painful. So I don't really think it's better than the RPK. I would say the RPK edges it out a little bit, but it's definitely a very solid option. And then obviously I just talked about the RPK, but the RPK is still a very, very meta weapon. I do think there's some other stuff like the RAAL and the SAKIN that really sneak in there and are viable options. And then after that, we kind of get into the range where it should be like they have pretty good TTK, but they also have pretty good recoil rather than having worse recoil like some of these other guns did up at the top. But for some reason, like that doesn't really exist right now. There are no guns that have this mid TTK, mid recoil option. It's kind of LMGs with pretty good recoil and really good time to kill numbers, or you use these ARs like the ISO HEMLOCK, the TAQ-56, the Lockman 5.56, and the Kastov 5.45, which are all ultra low recoil but decent time to kill. Like why would I pick the TAQ-V over the ISO HEMLOCK when the TAQ-V's recoil is just so much worse than the HEMLOCK, but the time to kill numbers are very similar. So it's like there's just really none of that middle ground anymore. I really liked the TAQ-V for that before. It was a high recoil, high skill, difficult to use gun, but if you could master it, it just pretty much beat everything. So I'm really sad to see that gun just got annihilated in the Season 2 update. I'm not really sure why that happened. But yes, anyway, on to the ones that I do think are viable. Those 4 that I just mentioned, the HEMLOCK, the TAQ-56, the Lockman 5.56, and the Kastov 5.45 are within 80 milliseconds of time to kill of each other, and they all have ultra low recoil. So if you have the time, the best way to do this would be to actually build all 4 of those guns out and try them yourself. For me, the recoil is almost indistinguishable between the 4 of them, but for you, certain recoil patterns might feel better. Visual recoil might be easier for you for one of these 4. And if you hit just one bullet, say you hit like one extra bullet with the Kastov 5.45 that you would have missed with the HEMLOCK, that's going to make up for that 80 millisecond time to kill there. So it's worth trying it out and seeing if one of these feels better to you. To me, there's no difference really. So the HEMLOCK is the one that I would recommend if you don't have time to try them all out. Summarizing all of that, I've got the highlighted weapons that I think really stand out for the long-range meta. The RAAL MG, amazing gun. It's going to melt people. It has decent recoil. The time to kill is just nutty on this thing. I've been afraid of a RAAL meta since the game came out just because of how fast it kills. You just won't be able to react anytime someone shoots at you inside 50 meters a lot of the time, and I hate that feeling. So I'm a little worried about this. I do think it is an S tier option for Season 2. SO14 on auto fire, I think is also an interesting option. Probably not for Al Mazrah, but for the small map, SO14 probably going to destroy people. It's not an LMG, so you're going to have better ADS, better mobility, things like that, but it still has phenomenal time to kill all the way out at all ranges. Weighted to 566. It does have a little too much recoil for Al Mazrah, though. The SAKIN, the RAP H is okay, but I just think the SAKIN's a little bit better. It's basically the same gun, but with a little slower fire rate, so you get more damage per mag. So overall, I think the SAKIN is a little bit better than the RAP, but it does have probably a little bit worse recoil. I mean, they're very similar. I'd say the SAKIN has less actual recoil and more visual recoil. The RAP H has more actual recoil and less visual recoil. So that's why they kind of got the same score, but they vary a little bit there. RPK absolutely still S tier. I think, in my opinion, it still edges out the SAKIN MG38. I think it's a little bit better. Better reload time. I think it has a little bit better accuracy from my perspective. So definitely still a meta weapon. The nerf does bring it more in line with where it should have been, though. And then we've got the low recoil options. So we got the ISO HEMLOCK, TAQ-56, Lockman 5.56, Kastov 5.45. Not much to say there. Not great time to kills, but very, very accurate. And then one honorable mention I want to talk about, the TAQ-M. TAQ-M doesn't look like it's very good here. I gave it bad accuracy and doesn't have a great weighted time to kill. But let's go look at how the actual damage numbers line up for this because it's pretty interesting. Okay, so these are the actual TAQ-M damage values here, and you can see it just hits like a truck. So it has a really slow fire rate, but if you look at this, chest damage does 91 out to 53.5 meters. So 2 chest shots, you do 182 damage, and then 1 stomach shot, you get a 3-shot kill out to 53 meters. That's if you don't have any attachments that increase the range at all. Or something like 1 chest shot, 1 headshot, and 1 shot anywhere else in the body gives you a 3-shot kill as well. So you can get some crazy just pop, pop, pop downs with this gun pretty consistently in that first range. Obviously, 2 headshots would be enough to down someone as well at 136 per headshot. It is relatively difficult to use at range, though, even though it still hits really hard. 63 damage to the chest, 49 stomach, 45 to extremities, and then 94 for a headshot. Hits really, really hard, but remember that this is one of those guns, if you've watched my recent videos, it has a damage value capped at 58 damage per bullet to armor. So all of these different damage ranges, in the first range, anything below 58 damage, anything in the second range below 58 damage, third range below 58 damage, all of those will be changed to 58 damage if the bullet hits someone that has armor plates on. So that sounds backwards. Plates should protect you, but they're using it as a balancing mechanism. And if you want more information about that, I've covered it in previous videos, so just go check those out. But yes, this is one of those guns that has a really big cap on the damage, so you're going to get much better time to kill numbers than what it looks like on TGD right now. I'm working on updating the programming to allow for that, but it's not there quite yet. But I just wanted to cover this gun. I think it's interesting. It's very fun. Probably my favorite gun to use right now, honestly, just because it's different and it can result in some really crazy situations because it has such good headshot damage and really good TTKs in that first 55 meters. All right, let's build the absolute best RAAL that we can. So we definitely want an optic on this. You guys can pick what optic you like. A lot of people run 1Xs in this game just because the visual recoil is a lot worse than it was in Modern Warfare 19. I tend to like a little bit more zoom, so I tend to still run the Schlager 3.4x whenever I can. Also, the true zoom values are up on TGD at this point. I put them up, I think, yesterday. So 1.9x is what these actually are. If you're playing at 115 on affected FOV setting, that is what the actual zoom is going to be for you. So I like the Schlager. And then if we scroll back up, we can do, so the laser, same as always, this FSS laser, the green, the red one, just has crazy pluses. So minus 10.7% ADS time, minus 10% sprint to fire. Obviously, we don't care about sprint to fire, but it also helps with aiming stability. So that laser is just amazing. Definitely the one to use. And then for the muzzle, so if you look at the recoil of the RAAL compared to like the HEMLOCK, so I've got the RAAL and the HEMLOCK on this recoil plot here, both 30 bullets. You see the RAAL has very little vertical recoil already. It just kind of has very little recoil, period. But it does have a little bit more horizontal than vertical. So I would say that overall, I'd like to just kind of balance what the attachment has from horizontal and vertical. We have a bunch of different options in this game, so let's go see which one kind of has the most of both vertical and horizontal recoil. So we're going to not use a suppressor on this. Suppressors are okay, but they just add so much ADS time, and this is already so slow. So onto the compensators here, the BVM 338 looks pretty good already. Minus 15% vertical, minus 20% horizontal. I think that's probably going to be the one that I like the most out of all of these. Shred CP90 would be very good as well. But yeah, I think BVM 338 is the one that I would want to go with for the RAAL. For ammunition, I think that high velocity is just basically the most valuable attachment in the entire game right now. So for long range, absolutely high velocity every single time. And then that leaves one more attachment. The barrels in this gun are kind of okay. The Rhino barrel looks pretty good. 48 millisecond ADS time, 10% reduction in recoil, and a 13% increase in bullet velocity. But it also really hurts your movement, which we already have terrible movement on this RAAL, so I don't really like that. So let's look at the underbarrels. For underbarrels, looking at these, it looks like there's some stats missing, and there definitely are some stats missing. So XRK Dune Grip and SA Side Grip look like they are pretty similar, but if you look in game, let's look in game real fast. The underbarrel, the SA Side Grip has recoil stabilization, and the XRK Dune Grip doesn't. So this is one of those things that if you played Modern Warfare 19 and Warzone 1, you know that the Commando foregrip was on every single long-range gun, and that's because of recoil stabilization. So that is kind of a thing that doesn't have a stat, and it's more of a visual shake and like a tightness of the recoil pattern left to right. That was just something that was never quantifiable in numbers, really. I spent a lot of time trying to do that, and honestly, I could have done it, but it's like it would have taken so much time that it never got done. So I do think the SA Side Grip, even though it hurts your movement a lot more, is the grip to use on this because we want to do everything we can to reduce that recoil. All right, let's quickly go through tunings. I'll just briefly mention things. So BVM 338 tune plus 0.62 ounces towards recoil stabilization. Everything's going to be towards recoil and aiming stability for us here. I think that gun kick control is probably a little more important than aiming idle stability. So we got plus 0.3 inches towards gun kick. Onto the SA Side Grip, plus 0.41 towards recoil stabilization, much more important than ADS time on a long-range gun. Aiming idle stability on the horizontal, plus 0.21 inches. High velocity, we've got tuned towards recoil smoothness, minus 0.63 grams. Tuned towards recoil steadiness, minus 5.52 grams. For the laser, aim locking steadiness is pretty important at long ranges, so all the way up to 0.5 ounces. There's no real optimization point on that one. And then plus 42.77 zeroing distance for aiming idle stability on the horizontal. Optic, for some guns, it seems like close versus far makes a big difference. For this one, I didn't really feel like there was a big difference, so I take the better sight picture. So I go all the way towards close for this one. And then plus 1.45 ounces towards flinch resistance. I think flinch is pretty bad in this game, so if you can get any sort of flinch resistance, that's a pretty big win there. Then hopping in the firing range here to show you guys this. ADS time is, I mean, it's bad, but it's not awful. Aim locking steadiness is really good, actually. Really, obviously, I'm walking super slow, so that's probably why. But actual recoil is super, super manageable. Like, I can put every bullet in the same spot at the end of this. Even though it's visually shaky, the actual recoil is very, very small. So I think this is a meta choice for sure. All right, onto the SAKIN. Let's go look at the recoil real fast so we can get an idea for the muzzle. So the SAKIN's in blue. You can see that it has a lot of horizontal bounciness as it goes up. So just a lot of horizontal recoil there. Even more important to reduce that on this than the RAAL, I think. So we're going to go full horizontal reduction for our muzzle. So if we look at the muzzles, see which one has the most horizontal reduction. Tempest GH is the most vertical, and then the TY LR8 has the most horizontal. So we're going to go with the TY LR8 for the muzzle. And then everything else is going to be the same logic we used for the RAAL, just for this. So we're going to use whatever optic you want. Again, you can pick whichever one you want. I tend to like the Schlager still. Then for ammunition, we're going to do high velocity. And then for the underbarrel, we're going to do the same thing we did on the other one, where even though the stats on TGD don't look that much different here, I think that the Bruin Warrior LMG grip is the same idea as the grip was for the RAAL, where I think it is helping with that recoil stabilization. Even though that doesn't show up in the actual statistics of the numbers, I think this is probably still the grip to go with. On to the tunings, I'm kind of just going to flash through these real fast. I'm not going to talk about them. So same logic as the RAAL, though, if you want to hear what I think. So recoil stabilization for the muzzle, gun kick control, Bruin Warrior LMG grip, recoil stabilization, aiming idle stability, high velocity, recoil steadiness, and recoil smoothness. The laser, aim locking steadiness, and aiming idle stability. And then for the optic, again, close versus far is personal preference. I tend to like close, and there's not a whole lot of difference there, in my opinion, in visual recoil, and then flinch resistance. So a quick comparison in the firing range. This is that SAKIN. You can see, again, LMG ADS time, but it's not like the worst in the world. It's usable in Warzone 2. Pretty good walking steadiness. And then for the actual recoil, very doable. So I'm going to pick like this corner over here and just try to put a bunch of bullets into it. You can see I have virtually no problem just holding it right in that corner as I'm firing my shots. And then a quick swap over to the RAAL. This is the same RAAL that I was showing earlier. There's definitely more visual recoil, but actual recoil, comparable. I would say it's not a whole lot different. So it's a little easier to see your target with the SAKIN versus the RAAL, but the RAAL just has that ridiculous time to kill that I think makes up for it in most cases. Onto the HEMLOCK. So HEMLOCK is held back by its mag size a little bit. I didn't mention that before, but it only has a 45 round mag versus the TAQ-56, which has a 60 round mag. So that is something to think about. It's very similar in TTK, but slightly better, but you're going to have 15 less bullets. So for trios and quads, mag size could be a little bit of a problem, but overall, it's a comparable weapon to the TAQ-56, I would say, with that difference there. But let's do a recommended build here. So these stats aren't on TGD yet. Sim hasn't released the HEMLOCK stats. They're working on, I think, a big data rework for the format of the data on their site. So I'm sure they're working on this. But anyway, that's why the stats aren't up on TGD yet. So we can kind of assume that these will be the same as other weapons, or at least very similar. So I would say for this, you just kind of want to balance vertical and horizontal because both are very important. So let's go look at a different weapon and see how these numbers stack up there. So this is TAQ-56 numbers. So we would want to use the FJX Fulcrum Pro, I believe, for this muzzle. So let's go find that on the TAQ-56. So there we go, got that attachment now. And then the rest of the build is going to be similar as always. So same laser. We always want high velocity. One thing to note, my friend FPS Krieger found that blackout rounds were hit scan, and I believe they still are hit scan, and that sounds tantalizing, but the 300 blackout rounds, even though they're hit scan right now, they add a bunch of recoil and visual recoil as well. So it also hurts the time to kill compared to the base weapon. Even though it increases damage, the actual change in fire rate and change in damage results in a worse time to kill. So even though blackout rounds are hit scan, I don't really think it's the best choice right now. I think going with high velocity, just with standard caliber ammunition, is the way to go there. Obviously 45 round mag, and then an optic. So whatever optic you want here would be great. Obviously, like I said, we don't have the data for this yet, so one of these barrels could be the choice instead of either a laser or the muzzle, but most likely the muzzle will still end up being the best. So like I said, for the other weapons, I prefer having some pretty good zoom, so I always go with the Schlager, especially on these lower recoil weapons. They're manageable for sure. Going through the tunings real fast, for the muzzle, we've got recoil stabilization, gun kick control, the high velocity ammunition, recoil smoothness, recoil steadiness, laser, aiming idle stability, and aim walking steadiness, and then optic, flinch resistance, and close or far. That's personal preference again. One last quick build here, basically just swapping the laser for an underbarrel. On the HEMLOCK, we got the FTAC Ripper here. This tends to help the most with recoil. So the reason people use this, again, even though in the stats it doesn't show that it helps with recoil as much as the other underbarrels, it has that recoil stabilization, and it's definitely doing something. It's just something that there's no number for in the code right now that Sim can see. So that's why there's no stat for that. But it's absolutely helping with visual recoil, screen shake. It just makes the recoil pattern a little bit tighter. So it makes a big difference for some weapons. For other weapons, it seems to be almost like it doesn't do anything. But for this HEMLOCK, I think it does make a pretty big difference. So absolute beamy HEMLOCK here. And then tunings for that FTAC Ripper, recoil stabilization, and aiming idle stability. So this is a great build as well. Taking this into the firing range, you're going to see that it has much better ADS movement speed, better ADS time for sure than the big heavy LMGs we've been looking at. But you have to remember that time to kill is very much slower than like a RAAL at range. So looking at this, recoil-wise, very, very accurate. I would say visual is dramatically less than both the SAKIN and the RAAL. And actual recoil is probably somewhat similar to those weapons, but I'll do a quick comparison here. So I'll put all 45 rounds into the corner so you guys can see what the visual and actual recoil looks like. And then if I swap over to the SAKIN, you're going to see that this is going to have quite a bit more screen shake, screen wobble. Yeah, I would say that at least after the first few shots, they're pretty similar, but for the first probably 5 to 10 shots of the SAKIN, it has much worse visual recoil and actual recoil than the HEMLOCK. Last up here, I want to talk about the TAQ-M. I told you this one is unique and very fun, so I wanted to give you guys a build for it. Basically, we are going to use the standard laser, so that's really important for this gun because this is a semi-auto weapon, so we need that recentering to be very similar to where it was when before you shot the round, and that's what aiming stability does. So if you have aiming stability will continue during the recoil, so after you take a shot, if you have really bad aiming stability, it won't recenter to the same point. So that's really bad for a semi-auto weapon. So we've got that same laser, which is extra important in this case. Tunings, aiming stability, aim walking steadiness. And then we have the underbarrel. So we're going to do something different here. We're going to use an underbarrel that also helps with aiming stability. So instead of using a muzzle like we've used on the other weapons, we're going to use one of these because these don't hurt that aiming idle stability. So phase 3 grip helps with recoil stabilization, and aiming stability. Tunes for that. Tuned towards recoil stabilization and aiming idle stability. High velocity ammunition always tuned for damage range in this case rather than recoil smoothness, because drop-offs are relatively significant, especially on chest and headshot. So just extending that damage range out will be a little bit more of a benefit here for this weapon. And then a really high zoom optic, I think, works well on this compared to the other long-range weapons. So this is the DS Farsight. This is a hybrid optic, has 2 zoom levels. One that's close to like a 2x, and then one that's more like a 5x if you ever need that. Tuned towards flinch resistance and close range. If we hop into the actual firing range here, it's got a beautiful sight picture and almost no aim sway. So you can just put shots in the same spot virtually over and over with this, and it hits really, really hard. Headshot damage is crazy. It'll do over 100 headshot damage in the first, at least the first 1 or 2 damage ranges. And then if you ever need to zoom in with this, you have even extra zoom, so you can really hit those headies if you need to, if someone's sitting on a head glitch. So I've had a ton of fun using this. It does use sniper ammo, but because we have a backpack system, we can carry extra sniper ammo beyond the 40 normal rounds. So that's why it tends to be a little more effective in Warzone 2 to run one of these semi-auto guns with sniper ammo than it did in Warzone 1. All right, guys, that's it. I think I covered what I think are the top weapons in the game right now. Obviously, RPK, I didn't go over for a recommended build or anything like that because it's just been the meta for so long. It's still good. You can still build it the same way you always have. It'll still be an S-tier choice, but I wanted to give you guys some different things that I think actually do compete with it nowadays. It's still one of the best, but there are other options that I think are pretty solid. So that's it for this video. Took me a ton of time to go through this and really figure out what the meta was. If you appreciate all the work I put into this, the best way is always just to support through TGD membership. It's $5 a month, and it supports us developing the website as well as continuing to make YouTube videos. I just wanted to mention that. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.